Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what's going on? This is Jeff Hartman, editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com with another episode of the Steelers Burning Question. And folks, I understand that right now you're probably having a little Antonio Brown fatigue. I have it. I know a lot of people have it, and that is where they're just so sick and tired of hearing about Antonio Brown, and it just won't go away, not until the deal's finally done. And even though today, Wednesday, we got a report from multiple avenues. It was Ian Rappaport, it was Adam Schefter of ESPN. They all said the same thing, that the sources are saying that a deal could or should be done by this Friday. For the sake of all things holy, I hope that that happens, because then there's some finality to the situation and we can all move on. What draft pick do the Steelers get for Antonio Brown? What exactly is the compensation? Do the Steelers have to give up anything? Is there a player involved? All these questions that we've been asking since Antonio Brown started his craziness, I should say, we'll finally have some solid answers to. But for today's burning question, it has nothing to do with Antonio Brown. So if you're someone like me that is having some Antonio Brown fatigue, well, you might actually enjoy this episode. Today's burning question is simple, and that is, if the Steelers are going to target a big name free agent next week when the new league year begins, who should they target and why? Now, if you're a first time listener, or if you're viewing live on YouTube for the first time, I encourage all of you to go to the live chat, and you can correspond with me throughout the show. And as most of you know, about midway through the show is when I'll open up our question and answer segment, where you can ask questions and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. If you're listening in podcast form and you're on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, feel free to go into the comment section there and let us know what you think. What is your answer to the burning question this week? So, some of the big name free agents. Now, let's first define what is a big name free agent. This is a player that is going to be highly sought after by multiple teams. We've all seen those free agents that kind of, it's 1 or 2 weeks into free agency, no one signed them. They're visiting a couple teams. They're basically hopping around hoping someone is going to write a check. The Steelers have signed some players like that, but these are day one free agents that you say, this player can truly help the team. Now, the list is actually not that illustrious. Illustrious is not the right word. It's not that great this year. I did some searching today prior to the podcast, and I was looking at available free agents at multiple positions that the Steelers could be interested in. And I'll give you an example. The cornerbacks that are available, yikes, not very good at all. The Steelers might be better suited trying to bring Cody Sensabaugh back, who is on that free agent list, than trying to go out and spend a lot of money on someone who's not going to improve them at a position of need. With that said, that doesn't mean that Cody Sensabaugh would be considered a big name free agent. Look, the big names are the players that were potentially going to be franchise tagged and for whatever reason weren't. And so now they're going to face free agency. So the biggest name, in my opinion, and Steeler fans will be talking about this name a lot, and they've heard this name a lot in the last 4+ years, is CJ Mosley. That's the inside linebacker of the Baltimore Ravens. He was a first-round draft pick. He spent 5 years in Baltimore, and although rumors are, and the releasing of Eric Weddle, which happened Tuesday afternoon, all signs indicate that the Ravens are trying to sign some of these defensive players that they have a ton of free agents on their defensive front. Terrell Suggs, Zadarius Smith. You even have now Mosley, as we talked about. Supposedly, they're going to try to bring Mosley back, but it's not going to be under the franchise tag. That ship has sailed. Now it's going to have to be in terms of a long-term contract. But let's say they don't get a deal done. Let's say that Mosley actually hits free agency. Could or should the Steelers go after him? Well, it depends on who you talk to. For instance, if you're a skeptic, you're going to say that CJ Mosley is a player that struggles in coverage and that the Steelers don't need a linebacker that can't cover, because we all know that the responsibilities of the linebackers, both inside and outside, in Keith Butler and Mike Tomlin's scheme, requires you to be able to cover tight ends, running backs in the flat, and sometimes even slot receivers. So a lack of coverage there is not great. But at the same time, Mosley brings a wealth of experience from a 3-4 defense, very similar to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He covers well enough. I don't think he's John Bostic in coverage, which is horrible. But at the same time, I think he covers well enough that you could actually manipulate a plan and orchestrate a plan so that he would not be picked on every single time that he is on the field. But at the same time, with a player that has a deficiency like that, should you go out and target someone like that and be willing to pay top dollar for someone that has a glaring weakness? I don't know. First, I'd debate whether it would be a glaring weakness, but I would definitely say it's a weakness. I'm not sure if the Steelers are going to be willing to pay that much money. Now, how much money do the Steelers have? Because a lot of stuff has happened between now and then. The Steelers re-signed Tyson Alualu. That cuts into their salary cap. They tendered Xavier Grimble. That cuts into their salary cap. They just tendered BJ Finney recently, which means that Ramon Foster is probably gone, but that cuts into their salary cap. So I sent a message to my cohort there in Simon Chester across the pond, and he's our salary cap guru for BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. And I said, hey, what's the number like now after all this stuff has gone on? What's the number like? How much money do the Steelers actually have in their salary cap? He said, roughly ballpark figure $12.5 million available. So not a lot. So when we talk about like a CJ Mosley, would the Steelers really want to go after him? How much money do they have available? Well, let's stop for a second and let's remember that the Steelers are probably most likely planning on redoing Ben Roethlisberger's contract. Now, whether that's in the form of an extension or whether they give him a brand new deal, he still has 1 year left on his current contract. Either way, you can expect them to take his $25+ million cap hit for this season and decrease that significantly. So let's say they even just take 10 million off of his cap hit for this season. Well, that 12.5 obviously turns into 20 or 22.5. So it's a significant raise. Now, also, they can restructure other players' contracts, players that have recently had new deals and new contracts, and try to free up space that way. So that number, that 12.5 that so many fans look at and think they don't have enough room to do anything, that can be changed quickly. So I expect you'll see some of that news happen next week prior to the start of the new league year. They'll get Roethlisberger's contract done. They'll start to restructure a couple deals. Also, they have some money in their bank so that if they want to throw some money, some big money at some of these players or one of these players, they absolutely can. So CJ Mosley, is he worth going after? Yes. Is he worth breaking the bank? No. I don't think he is that type of player, although he'd be a huge upgrade, and I think he would help in run defense, and he'd help with the orchestration of getting guys where they're supposed to be, and that's something the Steelers have struggled with the last few seasons or since Ryan Shazier was injured in 2017. I think that Mosley is someone they definitely should put a call in, see if they can get a deal. That's if he hits free agency. Remember, there's no guarantee that happens. By the time that you listen to this, he might have already signed a new deal with the Ravens, in which case it becomes a moot point. But there's another player. This is from the NFC East. This was a shock to a lot of people. Landon Collins, former New York Giant, is told basically that he's going to be able to test free agency. He's a strong safety. And a lot of people might say, well, they just drafted Terrell Edmonds. Why would they need to get Landon Collins? Landon Collins is a little bit different of a player. Terrell Edmonds, obviously a rookie, played a lot last year. Doesn't mean that he should have played a lot last year. I think if Morgan Burnett weren't as injury prone as he is or was, I think that the Steelers would have probably had Terrell Edmonds being the sub package linebacker. Now, with that said, I think a lot of people they think about sub packages and they think, oh my gosh, like, well, why would you bring in Landon Collins if you want to have just like a sub package player? Because he would fit the mold perfectly to be that guy that comes in off the bench, that can be that thumper on the inside, can still cover, is a great tackler, very smart, very knowledgeable. Why would you need him? And I look at it and say, well, you're only in your base defense maybe 25% of the time. So that means that you would be signing a player that could play 75% of the snaps. Therefore, that's not a bad signing. So Landon Collins, I think, would be a great compliment to Sean Davis. Actually, I would like to see him next to Sean Davis and have Terrell Edmonds go to that linebacker hybrid role. I think this is the guy that if the Steelers are smart, they go after him. They're aggressive going after him. They go in there and say, "Look, we're willing to give you we're going to give you top dollar to see if you can come to Pittsburgh because if they can get Landon Collins, it not only helps the inside linebacker position because they can move some pieces around, it also solidifies a secondary. I think the secondary could use another voice back there that helps people get where they're supposed to be. He's a guy that is a great tackler, as I mentioned. That's someplace the Steelers have struggled. There's not as many glaring deficiencies in Landon Collins' game. I like his game a lot. I liked his game coming out of Alabama when he was entering the NFL draft. I think the Steelers would be smart to go after Landon Collins with a very aggressive, I think like Donta Hightower a few years ago when they were really, really courting him hard. Now, granted, they didn't get him, but I think they should take a similar approach with him, with Collins, I should say, this offseason. So who else is out there? Well, Eric Weddle, I mentioned him. He was recently released. Is he a guy that you would go after? I wouldn't go after him unless Collins signed somewhere else and a couple other safeties. And if that's the case, you can always go into next season with who you have now. They still do have Morgan Burnett under contract. Terrell Edmonds is a rookie. Sean Davis is still on his rookie deal. They have some players back there. They drafted Marcus Allen last year. Jordan Dangerfield will be back as well. So it's not like the cupboard is completely bare. But if you're looking for someone that's experienced, if you're looking for someone that's a veteran player, someone that is a great leader in the locker room, then maybe Eric Weddle's a guy that you say, hey, look, I think we got a team here. He's good friends with Ben Roethlisberger, so that could be a selling point as well. You say, hey, well, what do you think about coming over here? Maybe not getting as much money, but finishing your career with a chance to win a championship. And we'll see where that goes. But I would not say he would be if we're labeling these free agents as Class A as the must-get players, Class B, A, yeah, kind of, and then the C and below are if they're available and the price is right, we'll take him. I'd put him in that Class B. So he's not a player that I'm going to go break the bank for, but at the same time, if he's still available, maybe I'll give him a shot. Now, Zadarius Smith is someone that not a lot of Steeler fans are talking about. He's another Ravens linebacker. He's an outside linebacker, and he's a younger guy coming off his rookie contract. And he actually went to school with a Bud Dupree, I believe, at Kentucky, and he has performed extremely well. He's an outside linebacker. I'm not sure he's a 3-4 outside linebacker. Not a lot of teams have really embraced the 3-4 as many thought they would. The Steelers are so thin at outside linebacker. I almost think that if they can get someone like him, it would be smart because you have Bud Dupree, T.J. Watt, Anthony Chickillo is an unrestricted free agent. Who knows if they're going to bring him back? Other than that, you have no proven players. Keon Adams, who was on the practice squad last year, Ola Adenye, who came up, who was on injured reserve for the majority of the season, and that's it. So I think it'd be smart to give him. I'd put Zadarius Smith also in that Class B category. Other than that, you look at the wide receivers. You have Golden Tate, Dante Moncrief. No one jumps off the page. No one does. The biggest name free agent's a guy that the Steelers are going to lose, and that's Le'Veon Bell. But I will say this: if Antonio Brown does leave, and all sources point to the fact that he is going to leave, I would be totally fine with them bringing in a Dante Moncrief or a Golden Tate. I don't think it's going to cost a ton of money. But at the same time, I think they're players that can really, really help the Steelers offense because, like I said in past shows, if you think about it, without Antonio Brown, you have, let's go over the receiving corps. Juju Smith-Schuster. He would presumably be the number one. You have Ryan Switzer, who came in extremely late via trade from the Oakland Raiders. And then you have James Washington, and that's really it. Justin Hunter's a free agent. Darius Hayward-Bay is a free agent. Eli Rogers is a free agent. They're going to have to basically say, we're going to bring in somebody. I don't think you can rely on just the NFL draft at receiver and hope to get by, period. So I think that they will target a receiver. There's just not a lot of big-name receivers out there that are available. So maybe they go with a Moncrief or a Tate and try to get someone that has that veteran role. It's not going to be the same distraction that can open up the field like Antonio Brown did. But at the same time, you never know. So we'll see what happens there. In terms of grading these out, I would say that if I'm the general manager of the Steelers, and if this is where if you're in the live chat right now and you're taking a look at the players that I mentioned, we're talking Landon Collins, CJ Mosley, Eric Weddle, um, Golden Tate, Dante Moncrief. If you're looking at a free agent that you're saying go after them and do whatever it takes to get them, who is that guy? Who's that guy that you would target if you're the Steelers, if you're Kevin Colbert, if you're Mike Tomlin? And that's a tough question. And for me, I think I've already said this. I'll say it again. For me, it's Landon Collins. I think that if they can go out and get a player like him, of his caliber, of his pedigree, it could really help the defense. It could also help them narrow their focus in the NFL draft in terms of where they target players at positionally. For me, I would not go for Weddle unless he absolutely is bargain bin cheap almost. So I'd go Collins, Mosley. Those are my top two guys. And then you obviously need a receiver. So Golden Tate, Moncrief, someone like that. Ben Roethlisberger has done a lot with a lot less. So I would not put it past the Steelers to bring in one of those players and watch them blossom in the Pittsburgh Steelers system with Ben Roethlisberger and Randy Fichtner at the helm. So for me, I people always want to know numbers, like how much would you give? And I don't know because the market fluctuates so much, and positionally you have to look at franchise tagging number. I want to say that for a safety, it was almost 11 million, something like that. Could be wrong if you're in the live chat and you know that number. Um, Let me know what that franchise tag would have been if the Giants decided to franchise tag Landon Collins, but I don't think it was worth it. But it's going to be interesting to see what they can do, how they can manufacture some more cap space, and ultimately if they're able to bring any of these guys in. This is a question I asked Lance Williams on the Standard as a Standard a few weeks ago, and I said, with all the stuff that's going on in Pittsburgh, you got Le'Veon Bell sitting out a whole year, you have Antonio Brown essentially forcing himself out of town, but Brown's throwing Ben, Mike Tomlin, Kevin Colbert, everyone that he's throwing them under the bus. I asked him, I said, do you think, and this is a great question for you if you're watching live or if you're on behindthesteelcurtain.com, if you want to comment, please do. I just kept on, do you think the Steelers are still a desirable destination for free agents? It used to be that everyone wanted to play for Mike Tomlin, that people are like, oh man, I would love to play for Tom. He's a player's coach. He's a cool guy. He's a younger guy. And now I just wonder, has that changed? Do people say now, well, I don't know. I mean, I heard about Roethlisberger. It's I'm not sure if I want to play with that guy. Or, Mike Tomlin, man, does he even have control over that team? After what Antonio Brown said about Art Rooney II and not really getting to know his players. I mean, that's not what I heard about the Steelers before. I mean, all this stuff, Kevin Colbert's 52 kids comments. I mean, there's so much crap, and I use that term purposefully. There's so much crap around the Steelers now. Might that deter free agents from saying that, yeah, I'd love to go play for Pittsburgh. I might take a little bit less to go play for Pittsburgh because that's what used to happen. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens and who the Steelers target in free agency and if they win any of these free agent battles, these recruiting battles, so to speak. So it's going to be really interesting to see exactly what goes down, what kind of players they get. Are they top tier players? Are they those grade A players? Or are they more of the grade B, C, the lower tier players? Should be interesting to see. So with that said, this is the time where we open up the live chat here on YouTube. If you're watching live on YouTube, we open up the live chat for any questions that you may have. Maybe you're questioning my thought process for some of the comments I made regarding some of these free agents. Maybe you have a question in general about anything. Could be Antonio Brown related, could be Le'Veon Bell related. It could be about anything Pittsburgh Steelers related. Now's the time if you're in the live chat. So before we go, I did have someone in the live chat earlier say, where do I think Antonio Brown is going to go? And that's a good question. And no one knows the answer to that question. There's been reports that multiple teams are interested. Then there's been contradictory reports saying that only one team is interested. It's really a one-team race, and the Steelers, and we're only going to go to, Friday's the deadline. We're going to get a deal by Friday. There's a lot of people that think that that's nothing but BS, and that the Steelers are just trying to drive other teams in, and they're trying to get the best deal possible. If I were to guess, I think it's going to be the Oakland Raiders. The Steelers have been very strong and stout with saying they want a first round pick. The Raiders have 3 of those. It just makes sense. John Gruden's the type that he's going to want a proven player. Derek Carr, if he flounders with Antonio Brown on his team, then he probably has some answers there that he had questions to. So I would say, if I'm going to guess, I would say that the deal was with Oakland, and they do get a first round pick. So it should be interesting to see how that plays out. Um, let's see here. Frank asks, "Why am I such a homer?" That's a great question, Frank. Um, it's it's uh it's definitely something that Lance always gives me crap for. If you've been following our show, the standard is the standard, or our post game show during the season, he always calls me Joy, because I always try to find the glass is half full when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've always been that way. Um, Even talk to some of my family members, they'll tell you that those years that were kind of down, I would always say, "Oh, the Steelers can still make the playoffs. You never know." Now, granted, they never did, but at the same time, they could have, and I always try to view it that way. So for me, I purposefully think that that's just the way I like to look at things. I like to be a positive guy. So, Yinzer brought it. That's a great point. I'm sorry. Yinzer brings up Jordan Hicks. I didn't bring him up at all. I guess maybe with Jordan Hicks, I felt that, number one, I've read a lot of reports that Jordan Hicks is not even going to hit free agency, that the Eagles are going to keep him in house, that they're not going to let him go. If he does hit free agency, go after him. But at the same time, I guess I didn't expect that to happen after so many reports the Eagles are planning on bringing him back, but he would be a great pickup as well. A lot of people, Frank, and I think I saw Isaac talking about Lance Williams. Yeah, I said it podcast, which ran, let's see, that ran today. It was Wednesday. It was published today. If you haven't checked it out, go to our audio podcast, which you can get on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, all those platforms. And shockingly enough, the hater Lance Williams, the guy that is so negative about the Steelers every single day of his life, he did a show on why the Steelers will win the AFC North. And so I actually listened to it today. He makes a ton of good points, and I actually believe him. I agree with him. And all I have to say is, if you're wondering what the crux of his argument is, it is simple: the quarterback. So keep that in mind. Check that show out if you haven't yet. Nate asks, how about a guy like Kelvin Benjamin, as a receiver? I don't know. He's bounced around so many times. I'm not trying to figure out where he last played, because I know he was with Carolina, then he went to Buffalo. I think he finished up in Kansas City. I don't know. He just seems like damaged goods to me. I think the Steelers are trying to avoid any type of distraction. So I don't know. I would steer clear. I would rather get several other receivers before I would go Kelvin Benjamin. So a lot of people hating on John Gruden. Hey, if John Gruden sends a first-round draft pick to Pittsburgh for Antonio Brown, and he already sent a third-round draft pick for Martavis Bryant, which the Steelers then turned into Mason Rudolph, who, as you know, I'm a big fan of, then I love John Gruden. I'm not hating on John Gruden. You kidding me? Let's see here. Reed asked, do you think all the offseason drama will keep any free agents from wanting to sign? That's what I brought up earlier, Reed, if you relate to the show. I don't know. I mean, maybe sometimes the public perception is not the same as the player perception. Maybe there are players that say, you know what, it's all a bunch of BS, because a lot of those guys are friends. And, let's say it's someone that went to Wisconsin and they're a free agent, and they call up TJ Watt. They're like, hey, man, what's the deal? And he's like, dude, don't listen to it, man. It's a great place, great coaching staff, great facilities, great fans. This is a place you want to be. Most of the time, I feel like the players would probably lean towards the player's perspective than the public persona. Vodka said, asked about DeAndre Baker. I believe you're talking about the cornerback from Georgia. I'm starting to learn some of these. I'm starting to learn some of these prospects finally as we get closer and we're narrowing it down. Mock drafts are still getting rolled out. The combine's finishing up. DeAndre Baker was mocked to the Steelers. I think in the most recent CBS Sports NFL mock draft, I covered that one, and he seems like a very interesting prospect. He's not one of those guys I don't think that is like a plug and play type guy. Could he play as a rookie? Yes. Is he going to play well as a rookie? That's debatable. He is a ball hawking cornerback. I like that. They don't have a lot of that. He is, by some people, think he's the best defensive back prospect in the draft, and that's more than Greedy Williams and a couple other cornerbacks. So, yeah, I think that honestly, he's a guy that they're going to be looking at. I'm really fascinated by the Steelers in the first round. It'll be awesome if they can get a second first round pick because it could only help them answer a lot of questions. Maybe they get an inside linebacker early. Maybe they can trade a pick, move up or move back. Devin Bush maybe. I don't think Devin White's going to be there 20. They'd have to move up to get him. But, there's a lot of possibilities there, Sid. It's going to be fun to watch. Thomas asks, when the trade, if I'm assuming you're talking about the trade for Antonio Brown is complete, am I going to go live? I did talk to Lance today. I definitely, whenever that happens, so let's say that happens on Friday. Friday night, I would definitely do an impromptu podcast, would send out a tweet. You'll get notification that we go live. If it doesn't happen, whenever it does happen, that's going to be something we're going to want to talk about compensation. We're going to want to talk about what the Steelers get in return for Antonio Brown. So let's see here. Isaac brings up a good point. We were talking about whether the Pittsburgh Steelers are still a destination, and he brought up, I don't think players feel that way if Brown's gone. And let's not forget Le'Veon Bell in this mess. He still sat out a whole year, brought a ton of drama to the team as well. I truly believe that you kind of cut the cancer out. You take those two players away. Where's the drama? Where's the drama left on the roster? I don't think there is any. And so when you don't have any drama on the roster, people talk about Ben Roethlisberger. Look, Ben's going to be Ben. He's going to say what he says, but he hasn't changed. I think that the Steelers, and I said this on Sunday on The Standard is a Standard. If you haven't checked out that show, make sure you do. You can check it out here live on YouTube as well as on our audio platforms. I said that, ultimately I feel that if the Steelers get rid of Bell and Brown, that they could actually be a better team. Now, that does not necessarily mean they're going to win more games, but in terms of team atmosphere, team continuity, I think they could be better. So keep that in the back of your mind as well. I think there's something to that. Snow asks, do you sign back Eli Rogers? I would try. I really would. If the price is right. Again, you can't. This is a guy that when he was towards ACL at the end of the 2017 season, he went to a couple teams before he decided to come back to Pittsburgh for one more year. If he gets a better offer, if he's getting a pretty hefty deal, then you let him walk. But at the same time, I think that I definitely, would like to see him back. I think he's a good addition to the team. Let's hear Crazy Chris says, hey, longtime viewer, would like to know your opinion on the Packers deal. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything specific to a Packers deal other than if they're interested in Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown, I think that if he's looking at the reports and if his agent's getting some information, some intel from other teams, he has to be hoping and praying that the Packers are interested, because what better place for him if you don't have Ben Roethlisberger? Well, if you go to there's only a few quarterbacks in the league that would be considered an upgrade, and Aaron Rodgers would be one of those quarterbacks. He and Antonio Brown would put together one heck of a duo. Could be very, very dangerous. So, how do I feel about that? Personally, I hope they send him to Washington. They don't even have a quarterback. Alex Smith might never play again. Colt McCoy, who broke his leg too, is considered their starting quarterback. They're rumored to potentially be trading for Josh Rosen. Send him there. Send him to FedEx Field. Yeah, that's not only does that sound like a Redskins sign, but it also really, really, really would be tough on Antonio Brown. And I'm not about to see him go run rampant with the Green Bay Packers anytime soon. So, Ron asks, how about Denard from the Bengals? He would be a good cover corner. I feel like he would almost be like what Mike Hilton is, and we have a Mike Hilton. I'm looking for a guy that can play outside consistently and at a high level, and I'm not sure he's that guy. So for me, um, I don't know if I'm gonna, like I said, I looked at the free agent list and there just weren't a lot of names that popped off the list. It's just not a very good free agent class this year, in my opinion. You might disagree, and that's totally fine. But for me, it just wasn't that crazy. Um, nope. Ali says Ben's the cancer. We laugh about his on-field antics and explain his turnovers. Bell and AB leaving hurts more than people want to admit. Look, there's no one, or at least for me, you'll never hear me say that their production on the field will be evenly matched because that's not going to happen. At the same time, I'm not saying Ben is not a problem, but I don't think he's not, at least not bringing it public. So yeah, he'll call out James Washington, but it's nothing like what other players have done. So Ben's not forgiven of all of his transgressions, and Ben is not necessarily innocent of no wrongdoing either. So I don't want to come off as that type of person. All right, Crazy Chris says, "Hey Jeff, what are your thoughts on getting Tyrell Williams from the Chargers?" That's a receiver I actually like. Didn't list him on my free agents at the beginning of the show, but he's a taller receiver. I think absolutely he could be a good addition if the Steelers are willing to get him. It's going to be really it's going to be for me, I look at this and say, what direction are the Steelers going? Like, what positions are they targeting? Because you hear these rumors all the time. You hear about that they're bringing in Golden Tate, or they're interested in Dante Moncrief or Williams from the Chargers. All these things, it tells you what they're thinking, where they're looking, what they're trying to kind of put in place, and it's going to just lead into the draft, and it's going to I gotta be honest, I love this time of year. I really do. It would be a lot better if the Steelers were coming off a Super Bowl win, but I do love this time of year because there's a lot of news. It's fun, it's exciting, and even though most of the time the Steelers fans are sitting around like kids on Christmas with no gifts because the Steelers rarely ever do anything in the first day of free agency, I will say this to finish out the show. I think that the Steelers are going to be more active in free agency this year than in most years. I'm not saying that they're going to go all Washington Redskins and they're going to go give ridiculous deals to these free agents, but I do think they're going to be more active than most people think. A lot will be said about how they handle the news of like Ben Roethlisberger coming up, with his contract. If they restructure any of their contracts, if they free up some more space, you can fully expect the Steelers to really start making some moves. Fun times. Enjoy it, because this can be a really fun time. And let's hope, fingers crossed, that the Steelers land a free agent or two that can really make a difference in 2019. So with that said, that's our show for the night. I appreciate all those that chimed in on the live chat. If you didn't know we're on YouTube, you can find us on YouTube. Just search BTSC Steelers Radio, BTSC Steelers Radio. And if you want to listen to us just on audio, which you get all of our shows, 5 shows a week, you can go to any audio platform that is iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcast. Just type in Steelers. We'll be one of the first podcasts that show up. Look for the BehindTheSteelCurtain.com logo. Subscribe, tell a friend. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next week on another episode of The Steelers Burning Question.